Putbut began to study Japanese. It was an end of an upbringing characterized by regimen and discipline. George and Ruby Putbut's idea of education was similar to John Milton's. And I use the John Milton music because Milton comes in as sort of like makes a lot of cameo appearances in this stuff about Milton. Okay, John Milton, in his of education, he recommends that 2 hours before supper, students be called out to the military motions under the sky, or covert according to the season, as was a Roman wont, first on foot, then, as their age permits, on horseback, to all the art of cavalry, in all the skill of battling, fortifying, besieging, and battering, with all of the help of ancient and modern stratagems, tactics, and warlike maxims. That's not the only attitude they shared with Milton. With their continuous need for enemies, their motto could have been taken from Milton's panegyric for Cromwell, "New foes arise." Their favorite blues singer was Little Milton, their favorite comedian, Milton Berle. Chappie had disappointed his family by being expelled from the Air Force Academy. The Academy regarded him as a troublemaker because he had tried to organize a Black Panther chapter among the few black cadets who enrolled there in the middle 1960s. At least, that's what everybody thought. In those days, he wore a big afro. It was so big that once some blackbirds tried to make a nest of it. He finally received his MA from a small college in Utah, and after one or two year stands at different schools, he'd settle in the English department at Jack London College. And I put Jack London. Somebody asked me that. Why Jack? Well, Jack London is like one of the most prominent celebrities ever to come from my town, Oakland, California. There's a Jack London Square. There are restaurants called the Seawolf. There's all kind of memorabilia in these little cafeterias and things. So we got a big Jack London thing, you know. And I ran across a piece that Chinese American intellectuals told me about that existed for many. They told me that the existence of this piece for many years, and I finally read it, the Unparalleled Invasion, where Jack London advocates the extermination of the Chinese from air back in 1914. And so I have Jack London College here because it's in Oakland, okay? The deal was that after 3 years of communing between the African American Studies Department, between those who believed Europe to be the center of all culture and those who said that the center of culture was Africa, he'd receive tenure in the Humanities Department. Those were the terms of his agreement he'd made with Jack London during his job interview at the MLA. He preferred that his tenure be in the Humanities Department. I got a humanities grant to support to write this novel. I just hate that. He'd be on the winning side, or so he thought. He remembered the rich baritone laughter of his father when he had informed him that he had gotten a job teaching English and literature, breaking the tradition going back to the Revolutionary War, when the first Putbut volunteered for service, not exactly in the photos of his ancestors in their military garb, which lined the wall of his father's Maryland den. One was missing. No Putbut served in World War II. His grandfather was missing, didn't serve. Both his mother and father, when they were angry with him, would say, "You're just like your grandfather." Other than that, they never mentioned the man. His expulsion from the Air Force Academy prevented him from finishing Japanese. He got as far as the 15th lesson. Benjamin Chappie Putbut III was now going to give Japanese another go. He had read one of those ads in the newspaper, Japanese by Spring, and had signed up with a private tutor at the beginning of the spring semester, 1990, hoping that by the spring of 1991, he would know enough to take advantage of the new global realities. He was talking that way now, sounding like a graduate student in political science, all about global realities, geopolitical this, realpolitik that, the Weltanschauung this. He was sounding like an edition of Foreign Affairs. So now, in this novel, the grandfather, we find out, did serve, was in a military, did follow military career, but he worked for the Japanese. He's on the other side in World War II. Because I don't know if you saw this documentary about J. Edgar Hoover, you know, who has sort of like a secret police barrier type police state over African American leaders and individuals since 1919. This guy was snooping around on Marcus Garvey. I guess he liked Marcus Garvey's hats, those wild hats he wore. And so I found out, I read a book called The Question of Sedition and discovered that during World War II, people in the intelligence community, including J. Edgar Hoover, felt that the African American community and intellectuals were in league with the Japanese, and that they were getting money. How you like this for paranoia? They call us all. They always say, "What you read? You and your conspiratorial." Man, my conspiratorial ideas are nothing compared to stuff that goes in Washington. They believe that the African Americans were receiving money from the Japanese ambassador in Mexico. That they were, aligned, but that wasn't true because these people were really loyal. And but there were a few groups, so-called cults in this country, some of whose members were devoted to the Japanese cause, and one was a group in Detroit, the Muslims, and they were in contact with a Japanese agent. I have the name in the book here, and one of those who was advocating the Japanese victory was Elijah Muhammad, who makes a sort of walk-on in this movie, this Malcolm X movie, and he was he was tried for sedition. He and 37 members of his mosque, and when they couldn't get him for sedition, they convicted him as a draft dodger, and he was 45 years old. So they get you on something, so he served. He did time for 5 years. He went to prison, and so there were pockets of. He believed that African Americans shouldn't be engaged in a war against the colored race. So this guy Putbutt, I put him in there as one of these. He's an old guy now, but in the 30s he was loyal to the Japanese cause, and he went to his. They smuggled him out of the country, and he lives in Hawaii. But he figures into the novel. So that's what I mean when I say that the grandfather's role during World War II is mysterious. Okay, I'll jump over to another chapter here, where the plot thickens. Okay, this guy, Chappie Putbutt, we have a place called Chicago Pizza in Oakland. I don't know why it's doing there, what it's doing there. It's sort of like upscale area called Rock Ridge, where they have New York delis and Chicago pizzas and things like that. I guess they're really nostalgic for home. And so this guy just bought some pizza from Chicago Pizza on College Avenue. We have a place called College Avenue before heading home. He came home to find cars with strange-looking men inside at each end of the block. In front of his house was a black limousine. One man sat inside. He was dressed in a business suit like the men in the other cars. His neighbors were standing behind their curtains peering out. He had to show his driver's license in order to enter the block. The machine gun-toting men waved him ahead. When he got to his house, he discovered men in the front yard and on the sides of his house. God forbid that the crack plague that was devastating East Oakland had reached his neighborhood at the bottom of Paradise, at the bottom of the beautiful Oakland hills. 2 men were standing guard in front of his door. "What's the matter?" he asked. They didn't say anything, just checked his papers, opened the pizza box, looked underneath the slices, permitted him to enter. Putbutt had written a piece for the newspapers that Americans had to give up some liberties in order to fight the drug plague. But when he wrote that, he meant other people's liberties, not his. He entered the house. His father was sitting in a chair, a cigarette in one hand, a glass of gin. His hero, General Daniel Chappie James, favorite drink, and he's been named after Chappie James, who was a black Air Force general. Chappie James' favorite drink in the other. He had adopted James' favorite quote. His father had adopted James' favorite quote as his own. "Yea, though I fly through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for I am the meanest mother in the valley." He was watching himself address a cheering audience of the veterans of foreign wars. On television, he was wearing a uniform, but sitting in his chair, he's wearing a business suit like the other men. "Dad, must your visits be so dramatic?" "It was my idea, son," he said without turning away from one of his usual jingoistic speeches. "Everywhere I go, they follow me. When your mother used to go to the store, it was like mobilization for war. It's because of our top security assignments. Why didn't you come to the swearing-in ceremony at the White House when I received my star? We missed you." He was concluding his speech, tears in his eyes, as he congratulated the brave men and women of the Gulf War for their tremendous accomplishment, and said, "As for our men from the Vietnam War, we say, welcome home, buddy. We love you." That brought the crowd to its feet. "We're not exactly a nurturing family, Dad. Why put up a front? You're our Patty Davis, all right," he said. He said that with both scorn and humor. He had a picture up in the den of his ranch-style home in Maryland of him and Ronald Reagan. Mr. Reagan was pinning a medal to his chest. "Look, Dad, I got a lot of poems to examine. What's up?" "You still got your flowers, I see." He pointed his head to the garden in the back. "Still cultivating. You were always a strange one, cultivating flowers, violin lessons, reading books. Dad, we've been through this 100 times. We couldn't spend that much time with you and your mother, your poor mother, captured by these sand niggers. No telling what heinous tortures they put her through. You stopped talking to her after you found out that she helped North plan the bombing raid on Libya. Now, what happens to his mother is that she's captured in the Middle East, but then at the end of the novel, we found that once she was captured, she turned the tables on her captors. And she has a photo, there's a videotape of her captors singing Onward Christian Soldiers, while his mother is sitting there with a shotgun on her lap playing a piano, a cigarette. And she decided that she wouldn't leave captivity until she converted these guys into Christian gentlemen. And we have a scene on CNN when she's finally leaves captivity. She lands at the airport in Frankfurt, and the people give her flowers, and the American ambassador flies and everything. And we find out that that the people who captured her are so pleased to see the American soldiers who rescue them from her, that they kiss their hands and everything, and are very jubilant because they've been rescued from that woman. Okay? I'm gonna get in trouble with that, I bet you. I can see it in the mirrors now. Hey, there he goes again. I grew out of my Gaddafi phase a long time ago. Those were the old days when I blamed everything on the United States of America instead of on communism and the third world's lack of a work ethic. It's the fact that she worked with a man who spent government funds on a security fence and shredded government property that bothered me to think. My mother working with somebody who would do that. Boy, did she put you through the ringer. Remember the time she threw you into a pool and nearly drowned, her idea of teaching me how to swim? I haven't been able to go near a beach since then. I was really traumatized. And then she stopped speaking to you when they threw you out of the Air Force Academy. He didn't answer. He wondered whether he knew about the faculty affair, the faculty wife, his affair. So that's bound to get the lowbrows continue reading because it's an affair. Later on, I put a little Judith Cranston there, for them. Son, I have news about your crazy grandfather. We think that he might be heading in this direction. The Pentagon Strength Department says he might contact you. Something about parental instinct. We know that he's left the place where he's staying. I don't know what you're talking about. His father squinted. I don't even remember my father. Besides, if I were in touch with my grandfather, you'd know about it. I'm sure that you're still having my phone tapped. His father was unfazed by the comment. I'm sorry, son, but they do that to the relatives of all people in my position. I'm heading a top secret mission. He leaned forward and clasped his hands. He resembled the actor Frederick O'Neill. I don't care. I insist upon my privacy. Don't worry, you're clean. But still, look, son, your grandfather is getting old. I want to make up with him before I die. Another lie, he could tell. You sure that's the reason? Doesn't matter anymore. What doesn't matter? Skip it. His father, the general, rose, put on his hand, and with a sharp turn, hands at his side, started toward the door. His pictures never did him justice, like the one in the newspaper that showed him knocking together the heads of two black dignity soldiers in Panama. He was stunned by his father's visit. Anyway, we'll find him with or without your help. I'm sure he will, Father, and he would. His father always got his man. Rumor was that General Noriega surrendered to the Vatican because he didn't want his father, who had been nicknamed the Black Puma, chasing his ass through the jungle. Okay, so now I'll skip over to where this guy has really been, writing these articles about affirmative action and all, the usuals. I mean, God, it's so cliche. I mean, there's an inexhaustible need for that stuff. I mean, it's just every day I pick up my paper. But anyway, he's writing all these things about, what's the line? Black people, their personal behavior is the problem and all. This kind of, the guy. And he's been cozying up to the people who are going to give him tenure. And then this happens. He heard the familiar clunk. The mail had arrived. He went to the box and moved it. One letter was from the office of the English chair. It was marked confidential. Here at last was the good news. Here at last was his ticket out of the African American Studies Department. He said on a panel about Afrocentricity that the idea of blacks as governing America before Columbus amounted to little more than elevated feel-goodism. He chuckled to himself as he thought of his fellow black panel members fuming as some members of the white audience rose to their feet and gave him an ovation. He opened the envelope eagerly and a smile began, and his heart began to thump. With pride and joy, he said that American education was being threatened by the triple-headed dragon of mediocrity, heterogeneity, diversity, and halfway down the letter, his smile disappeared. What? He had been denied tenure. They said that they hoped he would continue on a year-to-year basis and that they felt him to be an asset to the department. He thought of the Japanese word for every morning. It sounded similar to an American cuss word. His legs almost gave way from under him. He thought about how he had kept his nose clean, how he was a team player. He thought about how he had been sort of intellectual houseboy, like the one in the novel of the same name by Ferdinand Oyono, free to comment upon the behavior of his fellow housepersons, but fearful of describing the illicit activities among his employer's class, denouncing affirmative action, criticizing blacks for exploiting white guilt. He had been patient and had tried to negotiate. He had developed a power smile and wore blue blazers and white shoes. He had written an op-ed against divestment in South Africa. He had taken the platform and said that racism was an illusion, and that if campus were 95% white male, it was because white men were more qualified than others, that there seemed to be an almost divine mandate for them to rule. And then I leap on and jump ahead, and I have this thing about Charles the First and his being beheaded and the divine rights of king, and I put Milton in there, and because that occurred to me. I said, I guess I'll put that in there later on, and that's for another readership. Okay. He thought about the time that he debated those who wanted to make ethnic studies courses mandatory, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he hit them. Praised Greece, Rome. He thought about how he had said that the idea of blacks originating Egyptian civilization was the looniest thing he'd ever heard. He thought about how he had denounced Miles Davis. Said that Miles Davis should have remained at Juilliard, studied the classics, Purcell. He thought about how he had once referred to jazz as noise. He thought about his demand printed in a right-wing literary magazine that black writers imitate the Victorians. He thought about all the butt he'd kissed, the boots he'd licked, all for tenure, all for SOE. Images arose in his mind. The dressing down his mother gave him when he was thrown out the Air Force Academy. His father laughing until tears came to his eyes when he told him that he wanted to pursue a career in humanity, that he's more interested in a soaring intellect than spending the rest of his life in the cockpit of a fighter plane. It was his father's business to destroy humanity. Son of a bitch, he kept thinking to himself, son of a bitch. And what's happening here is he's afraid because the head of women's studies, Marsha Marks, what can I tell you? They're going to bring out a black feminist lesbian ecologist. I mean, she's got this long, like a Bass name, all this stuff in her name, and they're trying to bring her out to take his job. But she's assured him that's not going to take place, and so he gets double-crossed again. There was a smaller envelope. It was engraved. Maybe somebody's inviting him to a party. A party would cheer him up. The invitation said, Marsha Marks and Charles Obey of the African American Women's Studies Department invite you to a reception in the honor of April Joku, which is a Yoruba word. You look it up, it means something awful. But that's for another readership there. Newly appointed full professor in women's studies and African American studies at $150,000 per semester. He felt like having a drink. He went and got himself a bottle of sake that he kept around for special occasions. He heated some and poured himself a cup full, and then two, then three. What a double cross. All the while telling them that they had nothing to fear from the appointment of her. They had made a deal. Just like these devious Californians. Give you that serene surfer smile while stabbing you in the back. He gulped down the sake and poured himself another. He flung the cup into the fireplace. He started turning over chairs and tables. It was a sake that Jingo had introduced him to that night. And already I got a letter from some friends in Tokyo saying that Jingo is not a Japanese name, but I ran across a sort of like fugitive Amazon empress named Jingo in the Middle Ages, and it was spelled that spelling. So I don't know. I'm getting these letters already, correcting my. Well, it's not so great, but I kept that in there instead of changing it. I got a lot of advice on this. Because I wanted jingoism. I want to play on that. Okay. He felt like hearing some rough, angry, charging music. Blue Train, Coltrane sax began to move out of the station. Maybe his grandfather was right. He said these suckers are never going to change. I didn't read a chapter, but he did meet his grandfather in some secret hiding place in Marin County. And it turns out that he's a training security guard in martial arts to handle troublemakers on the campus that Japanese money is going to take over in the later part of the book. So he did meet his grandfather, and his grandfather denounces his father as the father denounces his grandfather. Okay. He took down the portrait of his hero, Thomas Sowell, and started to take down the one of Booker T. Washington. He decided against it. Booker T. was complex. He brought out the framed photo of Malcolm X from a desk drawer where it had lain for many years. He dusted it off. He nailed it to the wall. And then he gets out his Black Panther beret and all that stuff, and he's getting ready here. He stayed up all night, hurt, disappointed, betrayed. At about 5 in the morning, he heard the paper being thrown on the porch. He went out and picked it up. It was dark outside, and Mars was so bright and close that he thought it was a plane, but it wasn't a plane. It didn't move. And now I'll skip over to the last 2 chapters here. Chapter 24. And what happens is that he goes to his office, and there's a note telling him to report to the president's house. Why would anybody be inviting him, a $30,000 a year lecturer, to the president's house? Maybe they were going to fire him. With trepidation and apprehension, he started toward the end of the campus where the president's $2 million house stood on the slope. In the distance, he could see the Golden Gate Bridge. Behind the house, one could see the beautiful Oakland Hills, where mansions stood and lavish homes of the cream of Oakland society stood. He had heard about the art collection that was on exhibit in the president's house, Van Gogh's, Gauguin's, Monet's, Renoir's. But when he entered the house, he discovered that all this had been removed. Japanese paintings hung where these modern paintings used to hang. Dominating the wall was a painting divided by 5 lines. It was done in dark and light greens, reds, and oranges. Hundreds of soldiers adorned in the armament that feudal Japan dressed in for war. Some of it so beautiful that it wasn't meant to be used in battle. The Edo style are engaged in battle. They fight in between trees in the foreground of mountains. He read the name of the painting. This is a clue to what's going to happen here. The Battle of Sekigahara, 1600. He gave the receptionist, a Japanese woman, his note. He picked up the phone, and the man on the other end said that he would see him. He went inside of the office that he was directed to enter and saw a man sitting behind the desk. He rose. It was Dr. Yamato, his Japanese teacher. Pubatsan o genki desu ka? The doctor said, bowing. The president's desk had been replaced, and what appeared to be an ancient hand-carved Japanese desk was in its place. Some paintings from the Kano and Tausa school hung on the wall. One was by the great flower painter Hanabusa. Hana was a Japanese name for flower. Genki desu, Putbut said, surprised, staggering from surprise. I'm sorry, he said. Dr. Yamato looked at him and said, hi. Dr. Yamato smiled. He couldn't believe it. He'd never seen Dr. Yamato smile. It was like seeing the Ayatollah Khomeini smile. Where is the president? He's retired to the Ozarks. And what's happened is that they moved in there, and the other regime is gone. And before Dr. Yamato comes on, the school is being run by this guy's an inside trader. They hired him because they figured he's going to raise some money, because they're treating themselves as a business like everything else here, nickel and dime, anything. And so this guy doesn't know how to write a word of English, doesn't know how to speak a word of English, and he's the president of the school, but he's gone. And what happens is that the plot gets involved here. I have like these spaghetti-like plots here. And what happens is this guy was being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so he got out of Wall Street. He was a victim of a 1987 stock market collapse, Wild Friday. So they give him a job in California running the school. And turns out that he wanted to give Putbut tenure. This is something that you read the book. I'm telling you the whole thing. You won't have to buy it. He would have given awarded Putbut tenure, but General Putbut intervened and threatened to bring up this old Securities and Exchange Commission scandal. And so, because General Putbut still holds out that his son will abandon an academic career and enter the military. Okay. The president, he's retired to the Ozarks, Dr. Yamato said, in that halting but steady manner of his. What? The president went without a fight? He's like these other greedy American executives. He wanted us to give him a golden parachute. But there was a matter of this $2 million home and the unauthorized purchase of cars for some of the big wheels in the administration. Seems that he brought his ugly arbitraging methods into the university. Dr. Yamato, wearing that same old black woolen suit, walked to the window. You Americans pay your executives too much money. That's part of the problem here. Waste. You're over your heads in credit. Each American should be limited to 2 credit cards, and you should take rapid transit and stop consuming so much energy. Bart D. Ikimasu. The school is suffering from budget cuts, and this man was being chauffeured around a limousine. Needless to say, he went quietly. Your vice president, Witherspoon, has been forced into retirement too. Allow these various factions of ruffians to run the school, the FF and the skinheads, and they got these little neo-Nazi factions running all over this mythical university, beating up black students and jumping on people and interrupting Yom Kippur services, and I'm just going nuts. They're running wild on this campus. We know that has nothing to do with what's happening in the present day. American, I exaggerate this stuff here, but they're going crazy, and so anyway, order is restored. But we don't particularly like the way order is going to be restored here. Okay, they've taken control of the place. Dr. Yamada had a glint. There are going to be many changes around here. Dr. Yamada had a glint in his eye. I'm going to need your help. My help? But I'm just a lowly lecturer. Why would you need my help? I need somebody with whom I can communicate, somebody that I can trust. And when he said that, Pudbud knew that the $245 he had paid to learn Japanese by spring had been worth it. Okay, so Chappie Pudbud becomes the second most powerful man on campus in the university. And of course, he evens up with all these people who've, didn't award him tenure, and then, we get them all in there, and they all have to, I make them all, humiliate them and degrade them, and they have to, I say this guy's like Pirate Jenny in Three Penny Opera, he gets even with all these people. So this is, revenge is an old theme. I mean, Hamlet, they say we can't use, they have, Hamlet is, God, this guy's a serial murderer. By the time he ends up, everybody's slaughtered on stage. So Dr. Yamada says, yes, the reason that Americans are so backwards is because of what they call their core curriculum, changes in order. We will help them try to civilize them. And so what happens is like he gives later in the novel, he gives an IQ test to all the faculty members and students, and they all flunk, and some of the questions like, when was Zen Buddhism introduced into China? And name 3 kabuki plays and give their plots, and he gives all these IQ tests based upon, cultural literacy, stuff that every educated, civilized person should know. All right. You see, I have fun with this, you got to buy this. You love this. Okay. Okay. What changes are you going to make, Doctor? Many of your colleagues will not be coming back. I don't follow, Dr. Yamato. We're going to close down the Department of Humanity and move it into ethnic studies. Boy. You have African studies, Chicano studies, Asian American studies, Native American studies, and African American studies. We'll have a new department, European studies, with the same size budget and faculty as the rest. My backers would like to eliminate all these courses which allow for so much foolishness, but they also want to show how, to the faculty and students, how conciliatory we are. We will allow for these frills. Are they really necessary? All they accomplish for these people is to glorify some mythic past and to promote such dubious claims that Europe is the birthplace of science, religion, technology, and philosophy. I've been reading this so-called philosopher Plato, all about such foolishness as whether the soul has immortality. What nonsense. Hegel and the rest are full of such nonsense also. This ignorant man maintained that the Chinese had no philosophy. What rubbish. No wonder the Americans can't make a decent automobile. Their intellectuals spend all their time on these fuzzy and useless Greeks and German idealists. If one were to apply the empirical razor to all these so-called theories, the entire history of Western philosophy could be covered in 1 week. Also, I'm considering dropping the inordinate number of courses devoted to the work of John Milton. My staff has checked this character's background. He spent some time in jail, We do not think it appropriate to include courses about an ex-convict in our catalog. That also goes for Pederash. We found out that his nickname at Cambridge was the Lady. I'll have to think about it, Dr. Yamato. Now I want to see your new office. My what? Your new office. Japanese woman showed him a spacious office. There were other Japanese moving about the building. Files were being taken out of boxes. He could see all the way down to San Mateo. You got it. He just sat there for a while. He picked up the right-wing student newspaper. Dean Hurt's picture was on the cover. Now, this guy, Dean Hurt, was the post-hippie, postmodernist intellectual on campus, a very liberal guy, and all for affirmative action and civil rights and all that stuff and women's rights and everything. But when the Japanese take the school, he changes his politics. Now he's over here with the skinheads and all these people. So they're really moving a little too fast now. Hurt was shaking his fist in the manner of Lenin in a picture he'd once seen. He went over to the literature division of the Department of Humanities to start packing the office that he shared with 3 other lecturers. On the way, he saw Professor Crabtree, who tried to manage a weak smile. He smiled back. Professor Crabtree had always ignored him, and now he's trying to be friends? What was that all about? Pudbutt thought. So Crabtree is the first one to undergo this new cultural revolution on campus. And so this guy has been teaching the Milton Seminar for 30 years. And Pudbutt busts him all the way down to teaching freshman composition. First he resists and says, he has dignity and he doesn't want to do that, but he's got to pay the rent, So he comes back and begs Pudbutt for the job teaching freshman composition. He says, I haven't taught English composition, bonehead English in a long time. He said, who said anything about English? We're going to teach freshman Yoruba. Because Professor Crabtree had said that on a panel show that if the Yoruba had created a Homer, he would have read him. So there he goes. And then the other victim. Then he fires the deconstructionists. He decides that those deconstructionists believe that the words you fired really mean things in reality, can stay for the rest of the semester, and those who don't are fired immediately. Believe that the words only refer to themselves. So it's a lot of fun in here. I hope you buy the novel, and thanks for inviting me here, and I hope you found the novel interesting. Thank you. Do you want me to answer a couple of questions? Yes.
What do you teach at Berkeley, and what did your father want you to do?
Well, I think I was supposed to work in an automobile plant, and I actually went there when I was going to school and tried to get a job, and they wouldn't hire me. So then, started writing. I was writing a long time. So I think that's what my father wanted to do. That's what all my brothers on one side of the family do. They work for General Motors, and they live very affluent lives. And what was the other question? I teach a course called Introduction to Verse, but it's not really that. I do a lot of things under that title because I find my students don't know very much. So, people are thinking that the increasing immigration from Asia and the Caribbean and other places are a threat to Western civilization. Isn't that what they say? Is a threat to Western civilization? I go to Europe all the time, and nobody over there is worried about the survival of Western civilization. They have African-American literature over there, and they teach in some of the oldest schools in the world. At the University of Bologna, they teach African-American literature, African-American film, American film. So I always give an anecdote when I hear that because I found that one of my classes recently, the only person who could identify John the Baptist was a Chinese-American student. So maybe these people will keep the Western civilization going. Right? Yeah. Yes.
2 brief questions. In your opening remarks, Mr. Reed, were you suggesting that Japanese would be the 3rd language in addition to Spanish and English when America becomes trilingual in the future? And also, are you from Oakland originally?
Well, number one, I think English will remain the language of everyday life. And English is very flexible. I think anybody who believes that we should abandon English ought to try to study Yoruba or Sanskrit or something. I don't know, And that whatever ideas I had about this being, like a society where many languages are spoken, that cured me of that study in, different languages. I think artists have a different approach to this than a lot of other people. Like I always listen to, what's his name? Does Arthur Schlesinger teach here? Did he used to? I like Arthur Schlesinger Jr. He said that the reason that what justifies the European curriculum is that ideas of freedom and democracy rose in Europe. Okay, so I was wondering how an artist would think about that, right? Like Bud Powell used to play Bach. They used to let Bud Powell, it's great. He'd play Bach's works, and suppose he said, "Well, I can't play this because the Germans didn't have much of a history of democracy and freedom." Or, for example, who's another one? Ravel, who wrote some of his, not Ravel, but Ravel, who wrote some of his best works at a conservatory, borrowed from North African rhythms to do bolero. Suppose he said, I can't borrow from this because, these people have never had a history of democracy. So I think artists have a different take on this. And we borrow from, not only in as a way of tapping into other different influences. I can't think of the history of American or modern art, from opera to music and dance, had not certain artists been influenced by multicultural stuff, like Agnes DeMille being influenced by tap dancing, or Stravinsky, ragtime, or so there's or the Imagists being influenced by haiku and tanka. I mean, it's a different thing. So this thing I see on television where these people are debating all this stuff, I think is really sorry exhibit. And you asked, did I live in Oakland, or did I?
No, I asked you if you were from Oakland.
No, I'm from Buffalo, but I live in Oakland because it reminds me of Buffalo. So, so I have my it's sort of like a blue collar town. Because I was living in all these California communities that were really like boutiques and like upscale and everything. And so now I'm living in a home of the blues. I love it. A lot of people from Texas and Louisiana, and I live in a neighborhood where people look out for one another, and so I didn't find that in other California communities.
One of your better known essays deals with Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Did you ever live in New Orleans?
I go there often. I don't think I could stand New Orleans over 4 days.
Why not?
It's very humid down there, and it's sort of like a backwater in many ways. But Moon Landreau, the mayor of New Orleans, I use New Orleans so often as a metaphor in my work that he wrote a letter to somebody saying, as you know, Ishmael Reed was a citizen of New Orleans for many years. I had that letter. I said, that's great, because I never lived there. I write about it. I never rode a horse, but I wrote a book called Yellowback, and it was written up in Rodeo magazine. So maybe this will be written up in Jane's Flying Ships. I mean, who knows? It's all over. Yes.
I've taken classes where you were taught, and one of the things that my professor said is that contextually in your writing, there are contexts that I can't ever understand, not being African American.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's true? And I don't mean as in understand the actual situation, but understand meaning.
Well, I don't know about that. I think I don't know. I don't know. That's a debate. I mean, that's for scholars. Next time Skip Gates is in town, ask him that, and he'll no, seriously, I don't know how to answer a question like that. I know that I try to borrow from, I'm sort of like an ethnic gate crasher, I got a new book coming out here from Boston, a Boston publisher, about my ethnic gate crashing. I snoop around, like I'll sneak into a Korean American dinner. I wonder what they would have said if I hadn't been present about a month ago, where they're talking about the LA riots. Or I'll sneak into the Celtic Foundation where all these Irish Americans are, Irish American astronauts, Irish American writers and movie stars and everything. And somebody gets them and says, here's Ishmael Reed, an Irish American poet. All these forks start to drop in the plates and everything. So I like to borrow from many places. And when I can make a breakthrough, like when I wrote a novel called The Terrible Twos, thank you, which is very popular in Europe, very popular in the Netherlands and places like that. And they say it predicted the Iran-Contra scandal. Easy, that was easy. That's no big thing. I had treatment of Irish American culture in that novel, and I said, I'm really making a breakthrough. I was reviewed in Irish America.
I was thinking about like freelance pallbearers, like really solid contacts, Buka Dookie Duck, and all the.
Well, I don't know. I wrote that book in New York, and it's strident, and the decibel levels are high, and it's a lot of avant-garde playing around in there. Because I come out of my house and I see Albert Ayler and Sun Ra, and I see all these people. We're all influenced by, and all the painters. You go to museums, they have us, Warhol. And I used to sit around Warhol in Max's Kansas City, and so that I was trying to do what painters and musicians are doing that novel. And I've been very much influenced by film painters and all this. So I think that was a self-consciously experimental book. The freelance pallbearers, but I think as you grow, you work more in the field. The new books are different. I think I started off as a modernist, and so the thing about when I went to school, they were saying the more elliptical, the more the deeper something is. So it takes you a long time to get around to saying something like a song like "As Time Goes By" is profound, written simple lyrics. So I think that's all the result of getting more experience. Okay, thank you. One more? Yes.
Are there any more Conjure records? Still, you gonna be working with Kip Hanrahan at all?
Yeah, we're working together. There may be a third one. Do you have the second one?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are two. One is Conjure One, where Taj Mahal sings some songs I wrote, And I really enjoy working with musicians, even though I went with them to Europe, and I had a lot of fun, even though I can't play a horn or anything. It was fascinating watching them. So we did a tour of Europe in June. I went to Vienna and all these places in Paris, and I had a great time. And I got Jack Bruce of Cream to sing my songs, and Little Jimmy Scott. If I never do another thing, I got those two guys. That was great. So this collaboration is going to continue, and I think we're going to do a third. And now I'm working with Bobby McFerrin. We're doing the San Francisco Opera's hired us to commission us to do a work. And Peter Sellers, who did Klinghoffer and Nixon in China, is going to direct. I love his work. And there's another example of somebody using ordinary stuff in hitherto, which is been known as fine art, where you got Mark Morris doing everyday, stylizing everyday motions and walks and gestures, and some of the lines of the libretto in that opera could be journalism. So. When these guys get on the American Enterprise Institute and they seem to be on television, why don't they just buy a network? I see these guys all day putting on popular culture. They really don't know anything about art, and it's tragic because it's just polarizing things and on campuses, and they're just not informed. When they dismiss Madonna. Maybe you should dismiss the Madonna, but a lot of the popular culture is like today's popular culture is tomorrow's fine art, and that's the way it works in this country. So I don't know what these guys are thinking about. But this book is going to try to reply to some of that. We don't get a word in edgewise. I say, man, I wish I could jump in there and debate, these guys, some of them. So I don't know. But thanks for bringing that up and mentioning the record. And a lot of people like that record. In Europe, I'm known as a songwriter. So what can I tell you? I think one of the best poets are those people like the Gershwins and Cole Porter. And I'm doing my Cultural Revolution textbook. I'm doing a textbook for colleges, and I'm putting Hart Crane Alma Mater there. I'm sorry, I'm putting Alma Mater in this out. And put Cole Porter in their place, guy who wrote Stormy Weather. And I can't get started because I think they were the ones who continued the English lyric tradition, not this modernist stuff. I hate to say stuff like that, but that's just my point of view. Okay, thanks for coming out. We got some books. I got my magazine in there, back there. We have this is a big Irish American center here. And I published Bob Callahan. Well, yeah, that's true. I published Bob Callahan's essay on Patriot Games, this awful racist movie against the Irish. I thought they just put us down, but So I published that in there. You ought to read that. I got pictures of Skip Gates in there. I got a photograph of him, and I got a lot of other good stuff in there. So thanks a lot for coming out. Thank you very much.